Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
Welcome to WebRTC Live. I'm your host, Arin Sime, founder and CEO at WebRTC.Ventures. In today's episode, we'll be talking about everything you need to know about turn servers. I can say that after our team has been blogging about WebRTC for over 10 years now, our most popular videos on YouTube are still actually somewhat old, in fact, but introductions to stun and turn servers. Turn servers are still the answer to many of the most basic questions that people ask when building their first WebRTC implementations. And I think we'll see if our panel agrees, but I think even WebRTC experts still have to give turn servers careful consideration when debugging WebRTC at scale. So I know this is a topic relevant to all of you. And I have an excellent panel joining me for today's discussion. And you'll have time to ask them your questions. But first, let me remind you that our team at WebRTC.Ventures is a custom design and development agency focused on building live video applications. And we're here to help you take your application live. So let's go to our panel now. I'm joined today by three experts, all of whom have been a guest on WebRTC Live before, but let me take a moment to reintroduce you to each of them. First is a very familiar face, Sahi Levi from bloggeek.me. Welcome, Sahi.
Hi there, Arin.
Sahi will be covering some little foundational concepts briefly around stun and turn and why turn is essential for reliability, or is it essential for reliability? Let's see. Next up will be my colleague from WebRTC.Ventures, Hector Zelaya. Welcome, Hector.
Hey there. It's always a pleasure to be in WebRTC Live, so thank you for the invitation.
Always a pleasure to have you here. Hector will be discussing some deployment and architecture concerns around turn servers and sharing some common mistakes, best practices. And finally, Sandro Gauci of Enable Security is joining us today also. Welcome back to WebRTC Live, Sandro.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
You are last in the lineup today, but never least, just like security, never least in our hearts. Sandro is going to talk about security and how to minimize attack surfaces on your turn configuration. All right, let's get going. So thank you for joining us live today on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch. Welcome also to any of you watching a replay of today's event. For those of you with us live, you can ask questions throughout the stream by leaving a comment in whichever platform you're viewing this. We'll get to your questions at the end of the conversation, if not sooner, but ask them anytime. All right, Sahi, you're up first.
Okay.
That was sudden, right?
Yes.
Welcome to the big screen. Let's start with maybe tell us a little bit what are kind of the roles of stun and turn servers, the differences, what makes them critical in WebRTC.
Okay. So I think there are two things that make stun and turn necessary. One of them is the fact that WebRTC is peer-to-peer. In a second, we'll go over that. And the second is that WebRTC is running over UDP by default. Let's start with the peer-to-peer thing. WebRTC is peer-to-peer, which means that I can take two browsers and connect them to each other. The only problem is that they usually don't have a direct path from one to the other. So you can't really connect them because you don't know their IP addresses, which makes it a problem. In many cases, though, the service isn't peer-to-peer. If we take, for example, where we're running this or recording this session, it uses an SFU, a media server. So we're not running peer-to-peer. I'm not sending my media to you. I'm sending that to the media server that negotiates everything on my behalf. There I might still need a turn server because UDP might be blocked and I can't reach that server directly. So I need to go indirectly to it. Okay, so that would be the reason why we need it. For that, we've got two different protocols in a way that happen to be two different servers. One of them is stun and the other is turn. As we said, I've got two IP addresses, this one and this one, both of two different users. They both know their local IP address. What does that mean? If I sit here in my home, I've got my own local private network and my own private IP address. If I need to go towards the internet, I need to use a public IP address to reach a public web service. If I want to reach out to your website or to you directly, I will need your public IP address as well. Now, here's the thing. I have no clue what my public IP address is, and neither the device. The device needs to kind of figure that out. And the way to do that is through a STAN server. What happens is that I'm going to send a message. WebRTC will send a message from the client to the STAN server, asking him, hey, what's my IP address? What do you see? The server receives the address. In order to do that, we went through a NAT device, a network address translator device on the network. And that device is the one that allocates the public IP address for me. Since we go through that, the server sees that address, the STAN server, and then it would simply reply back to me saying, well, that's the IP address that I see. That's your public IP address. So that's the only reason we need a STAN server. Once I've got this public IP address, theoretically, I can give that address to someone else, for example, to you, and you can send me that directly to me. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't when the NAT address translator, the NAT device, decides that it wants to be very, very strict as to who can send me data when I send that message to the STAN server. It might simply say, well, it's nice of you that you sent out data, but only that STAN server can send back data through that pinhole that you created. So there are restrictions to this that might take place, that might occur, which is why we need something like turn. Okay, and like STAN, turn simply says, I'm going to relay everything on your behalf. Whatever you want to send to Arin, you're going to send to me as your turn server. I'm sitting in the cloud in a public IP address, so I'm reachable by both of you guys. If you send me the data, I'll just relay that to Arin. Okay, and that's what turn does. The best thing about turn, it's end-to-end encrypted. It doesn't know what goes on inside the relay, the actual media. It just sends it, and only me and you can actually encrypt and decrypt the data over there, over that specific connection. So there is no such thing as saying, well, let's record everything through the turn server. You can, but you can't really play that back, so it's useless. Now, to complicate things a bit further, there are three types of turn addresses in a way. There is UDP, TCP, and TLS. Why do we need UDP? Because we love UDP. UDP works best with WebRTC. We've done a session about that. Live streaming and live media prefers being done over UDP because that means less retransmissions and better quality at the end of the day on most networks. Why do we decide that we need also turn TCP? Because UDP might fail. And when UDP fails, we want to succeed in some other way. It might fail because many IT admins would simply go into enterprise network and configure UDP to be blocked. Why? Because nobody cares about UDP. Today, I think that's changing because of HTTP version 3. But up until now, at least UDP was popularly blocked by many different sites. And then we say, well, if we can't do things over UDP, let's do them over TCP as a fallback. Why TLS? Because TCP might be blocked due to DPI, deep packet inspection, and then we can use TLS instead. Why TLS fails? Because things might fail still. Okay, so we get this kind of a waterfall of things that we want to do. And the question is, okay, we've got all of these different types and solutions and ways to do things. Which one am I going to use for this call? For the one that we're doing now, me and you, Arin. And the answer for that is I have no clue. I just don't know. Which means that I don't know as WebRTC, as the actual client, as the application. Which means that what we're going to do is we're going to try them out, all of them. And the way to do that is for another protocol called ICE. So you've got ICE, STAN, and turn. ICE is a protocol. STAN and turn are both protocols and servers. So you're going to refer to them as STAN server and turn server. When someone says ICE server, it's a mistake, but it usually means turn. So ICE is going to take all of the addresses from all of these turn servers, whatnot, and then try doing connectivity checks, check the priorities of what we want and what do we prefer to get connected through. And then based on that, we'll get to a point where we can connect the session itself. All of that is automatically done by WebRTC in the background for you when you use it. Now, if you put on the slides that I prepared, it shows what happens when we make the decision or when WebRTC makes the decision. So if we're on a peer-to-peer session, not through a media server, peer-to-peer, the best thing for us to happen is to do direct UDP traffic. Peer-to-peer, I'm going to send the data directly to Arin. I don't need anyone else. Maybe I would go to a STAN server, understand my public IP address, share that with Arin. Arin send the media to me, and that would be the end of it. So the STAN server is there for a blip, and that's the end of it. Usually I can also find free STAN servers out there to use. The best one or the most popular one is probably the Google one. I still wouldn't use that. The reason I won't use that is because usually we need turn servers. And if we need turn servers, a turn server can also second as a STAN server without even saying that. That's common nature. When you go to a turn server and tell him, look, it's me, please allocate an address on my behalf and relay data, it would simply say back, you know what, I saw that public IP address. So that's kind of a STAN server for us. Now, what happens if direct UDP doesn't work? Next up our wish list would be relay UDP traffic. This means going through a turn UDP service. So I'm going through the turn server, but going to try to communicate via UDP. If that doesn't work, then we're going to fall back to relaying through TCP, turn TCP. And if that doesn't work, we're going to do relay TLS. Now, the difference between relay and direct is that a relay adds a hop. I'm not going direct to Arin, I'm going to another server, and that sends the data, and that adds complexity. Between UDP and TCP, I might lose quality. Because again, if there are packet losses, UDP actually handles that better for real-time communications. WebRTC can make more out of UDP than it can on TCP to maintain quality. So we'd rather have UDP over TCP. TCP versus TLS, I don't care. They're both almost the same. TLS adds encryption, but guess what? We're already encrypting, so we don't care. It's just there because it might help us move better. The other thing that we have is, well, there is something called direct TCP traffic. Some media servers include a solution called ICE TCP, which allows you to send data over TCP directly to the server. Now think about that. We had two problems. One is the fact that we're peer-to-peer. If we're using a media server, we're not peer-to-peer. The other was this is over UDP. But with ICE TCP, we can actually do TCP directly in front of the server, which means that if we are using media servers in our deployment, there is a way to reduce the reliance on turn even further by introducing ICE TCP on our media servers. I guess that's it about kind of the basics of where we're at with turn and a bit of STAN and ICE.
Perfect. Thank you, Sahi. You've condensed decades of networking knowledge into just a few minutes there, so appreciate it. Now, obviously, we would generally prefer, for a variety of cost and complication reasons, that traffic is not going over turn, but a certain percentage of sessions do go over turn in at least most configurations. So what percentage of WebRTC calls in production end up relaying through turn, and why?
Well, the sad truth is it depends.
Mm-hmm.
You can't know until you try it out. And I'll give an example, okay? Let's say that you're building a call center. And in that call center, the ones using WebRTC are the call center agents. Call center agent means that they are controlled and owned by you as the service provider. You're the contact center manager, and you're going to simply say, well, it either runs from the office, and then I'm going to configure that to work with UDP because I want my calls to have the best quality, Or if I'm going to send the agents home, I'm going to tell them, well, you can't work your shifts if it's not going over UDP. Which is why in a lot of the call center solutions out there, you will see that they don't configure turn servers at all. They just use UDP, and if not, tough luck. Same happens for many of the cloud gaming platforms. You want to play a game? That's great. You need to have the best network possible. Otherwise, go find something else to do. Okay? Then there are the enterprise guys. In different enterprise networks and certain cellular networks, you can get to 50% or more calls mandating to go through turn servers. Why? Just because. Someone decided the network needs to be restricted, and then you need a turn server in order to traverse that, and no other way to go. Usually it would be said that if you're doing a general purpose or social type of an experience, then anywhere between 10 to 20% of the calls would go over turn. And then out of that, 5% or less over turn TCP, and even less than that over turn TLS. What does that mean for you? I have no clue. And you need to figure that out and go check in your monitoring how much the sessions go through turn and how much not, to understand where you stand there. It might also indicate that there is an issue. If 100% of the calls go through turn, or 80 or 50, I'd ask myself why.
Yeah. All right. So the answer is deploy and find out. To use a different meme. All right, so thank you, Sahi. Stick around for our Q&A at the end, please. But I'm going to switch over now to Hector, and we're going to talk about turn server deployments. And for those of you watching live, this is a great time to ask questions as well, to go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll get to them by the end of the episode. So, Hector, what do we need to consider when we're implementing turn servers in our WebRTC application?
So let me start by saying that probably the best way to manage turn server is not having to manage them. I mean, unless you have a very strong reason, which they are, and I will go into that in just a couple of seconds. My advice will be to go with managed turn servers, because there you get the best practices, you get the distribution, you get the scaling of a mature and well-trusted solution. Because when you add turn, as Sahi mentioned, you are adding one more hop to the literally to the conversation. And depending on what's the usage of that hop, where it's located, where are your users located, that can really impact on the user experience that you have in your WebRTC or real-time communication solution. So, and if you can show the slides, I have a couple of slides here. So,
there you go.
So basically, you have three ways on which you can implement turn into your application. One is, well, use a managed service using something like Twilio or Xerxes, which gives you the minimal maintenance, because you can focus only on your platform, on your solution, your application, and you can rest well knowing that you have a strong backup, but that is high on operational expenses, especially when you are handling a high volume of calls or connections. So if you're just starting, you are not sure about what is your volume, and you don't have also the expertise to manage a turn server, the best route is going with a managed service. Now, there is a time where the expenses of having a managed service are higher than paying a specialized team to manage your stun and turn infrastructure. That's a good point to switch to a self-hosted approach, in which There are basically two main ways to do this. One is the well-matured traditional self-hosted Kotlin server, which is probably the industry and what the managed service will probably use under the hood. So making the switch wouldn't be that big of a change. In here, you are in control over the configuration, over the cloud cost, which will be cheaper than the managed service, but it requires that uh, manual patching piece. You are in charge of scaling and distribution, which is something very important that I will get deeper in a minute. So this allows you to manage and control your expenses, but you really need a high expertise there in order to manage this infrastructure for you. And there is one recent addition to this approach, which is going to the cloud native or container native by using the standard solution, which is the same benefits that you have with Kotlin, but now applied to modern Kubernetes-centric approach. Uh, those of you that have been working in this space for a while know that saying turn, stun, and saying Kubernetes has been usually a big headache for making it work. But
Yeah.
now with Stunner, this get much easier because it's someone solving that problem and make a stun and turn a first citizen class in the Kubernetes. So if you're going with, or if your solution already works on the Kubernetes, then probably Stunner it's a better alternative for you. Now, when you go to the self-hosted route, this is whether you are self-hosting using Kotlin or using Stunner. There are a couple of things that you should consider uh, regarding how to make this to work in the best way possible. And one thing, very basic, but seen a couple of teams struggling with this, is making sure the right ports are open, because as Sahi mentions, there are times where firewalls and networks can get a bit too restrictive. So making sure that you are opening the right binding ports so that you are able to communicate with the turn server and request for an allocation. And this is whether if you're using pure UDP, if you're using TCP or TLS, depending on the on how the network is configured, you need to be aware or make sure that the right ports are open. And of course, you cannot forget the actual relay ports, which is where your media is going to be traveling. And the other important thing is how to keep, and probably Sandro is going to speak more about this, but making sure that the access of your to your turn server is properly authenticated. And the recommendation is going with the share secrets with time limited credentials. Kotlin supports like having static user and password, but that is not a good idea. You should stick with the time-based credentials. And the other important thing is having into account your global latency, making sure that your users and the turn infrastructure is close so that you can reduce latency. Because if you have a user in Europe and your turn infrastructure is in the US, you are adding additional milliseconds or even seconds of the traffic traveling to the US and then to the other user. And there's a big through in networking that says that the light speed is in a mid. It's a low, and
Right.
media cannot go faster than that. So distance matters, and having the ability to have your turn infrastructure distributed uh, closely to your users, it's a big thing, and it's one of the reasons why I advise to go with the managed services first, because these kind of providers already have that sort of infrastructure, and when you're self-hosting it, having your big server in one central location is not enough. So you have to be uh, aware of that. And well, since you will never know how much of your traffic is going to through turn. Traditionally, this has been seen as an 80-20 rule. Now that 20% rule is more of like a baseline, because yeah, well, this will depends. But one good starting point is uh, guessing that at least 20% of your traffic will go through the to the turn infrastructure is a good starting point, and make sure you plan based on that regarding um, how how you want to manage your infrastructure. And I think that's probably it.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Hector. We've got a question from a viewer that I'll pose to you now. Rafael wants to know, when deploying turn servers globally to reduce latency, how do you usually handle routing users to that closest relay?
The easiest way is managing through application requests, and you are getting the credential, the time-based credential for that. You can guess based on where you get that request, what region, and route that request to the closest turn server that you have there. You will probably gonna need to have some sort of service discovery or mapping that of the services that you have available, and yeah, plan based on that.
Yeah. And that gets to your first piece of advice was, if you don't have to implement your own turn server, don't do it. Because that example that you just gave is an example of how if you're deploying your own co-turn globally, if you've got a simple use case where maybe you don't need to think about these things, maybe it's okay. But for most use cases where you've got a global audience, global user base across different types of networking conditions, you have to think about deploying across multi-regions and load balancing between them and all of that. So, if you have the volume to justify the expense of the DevOps team to manage that and monitor that for you, then great. That is going to be at high volume. That will be less expensive than a managed co-turn service. But for a lot of applications, especially in the early stages, that managed co-turn service is going to be more attractive on a cost and time investment basis.
Yeah, same as it happens with other things like observability, for instance, or media platforms. These are easily different project by themselves. So yeah, same applies
Perfect.
for turn and stand.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Hector. We're going to move over to Sandro now and talk about security concerns with turn servers. So, Sandro, thanks for hanging with us so long in the conversation. Appreciate it. You gave an interesting presentation that I saw last year at the RTC on conference in Krakow. Lots of great information on how turn servers can basically be a point of attack in your system. But as we've kind of discovered in a lot of situations, maybe in 20% or maybe 50% of the traffic in some enterprise cases, like Sahi said, we really need turn servers. So we can't just turn them off for security reasons, obviously. So what should teams consider in order to reduce the risk of turn servers being used for nefarious purposes?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, I mean, we, as penetration testers, because that's what we do, we kind of bring the hackers mentality or hackers view to this topic of WebRTC and especially turn servers, which is one of the more interesting areas in WebRTC security, in my opinion. And yeah, the way you guys see it as a media relay, but the attacker will see it as a proxy, the turn server, that is. Not stun, but when we're talking about turn specifically. Okay. And 2 weeks ago, we published a blog post, which is based on the talk that you mentioned. Thanks for sharing my screen. And essentially, we kind of split it up in 3 different attacks or 3 different security threats. And we also published security best practices today and a configuration guide for co-turn. So yeah, there's a lot of content now all of a sudden about this very topic. And in terms of the first threat, I would say turn relay abuse is the number 1, the most concerning. Security people will know what's called SSRF, server-side request forgery, where attackers can reach internal services through an API, basically. Say cloud metadata endpoints, or scan your local host on your server's local host, and so on and so forth, right? And turn servers are a bit like that, but even better than SSRF, because with SSRF, you get only HTTP access, but with turn servers, when you abuse turn relay, you can get to send traffic to all the protocols, not just HTTP. It might be UDP, and it might also be TCP sometimes. So turn relay abuse is when an attacker uses a turn server, gets the credentials first, which are freely available in many cases because the users need those credentials. And then they are able to reach your internal servers that usually are not very well secured. So they might have weak passwords or no passwords at all, some web interfaces and so on. So it can be quite bad. And we've been finding this for a long time, actually. But yeah, there was, we got bored of finding turn relay abuse in private client engagements. So we turned to bug bounties so that we can actually publish about this, because no one was talking about this vulnerability. And there's the most notable one where Slack were vulnerable, and we got a bounty reward, but more importantly for us was being able to publish this information. And then there were some tools on the internet which were published by other people. We never published ours. So yeah, that's one issue. The same relay abuse vulnerability was also mentioned last year at a hacker conference, DEF CON, which happens in Las Vegas every year. And it's the security researcher used it to pass what's called C2 traffic, which is kind of command and control traffic for controlling your botnet army, essentially, passing it through trusted services like Zoom or Microsoft Teams by using turn servers. So this is another way to abuse that. And we never really, published about this because we keep finding this in our private engagements. But sometimes turn servers are trusted, are on trusted IPs, IP address. They have a trusted IP address that perhaps is trusted by another system, like a SIP trunk in the voice over IP world, and it might allow SIP toll fraud or other attacks to be conducted from the turn server. So the attacker uses the turn server to reach out to an external host that trusts the IP on the turn server. And it trusts it perhaps because there is another system like a SIP server on the same IP. So that's one issue. Secondly, denial of service. And here we say, okay, if there is the threat of direct denial of service attacks on your turn server, but how much of a problem is it? And we said, okay, if it's on the low digits, then maybe it's not such a big deal. If your turn server goes down, because only that percentage of users is affected. It still is a problem, of course, but quite often we find out that the SFU itself is much more vulnerable. So, one has to start prioritizing which to test and which to secure first. But it still is a problem. However, more importantly, I think attackers last year, and I suppose it's still going on, we don't have information if it's still going on, but last year there were a lot of turn servers becoming part of joining an army of reflection servers that reflect attacks, denial of service attacks towards the victims. So the turn server can reflect the traffic to victim IPs when the attacker spoofs the source IP, sends a small-ish stun message, and the turn server then would send a larger packet to the victim being the one with the spoofed source IP. Okay. Now, I ask, why are turn servers being abused? Because, it's roughly times 2, 3, 4, 5 of the original packet, while other protocols are much better at amplification. However, it's being done, so one has to, kind of care about this. If you don't want to, receive abuse reports and join, this army of turn servers, then I think you should do something about it if you have a turn server on the internet. Now, the third thing is turn server software vulnerabilities. We still see a lot of unpatched co-turn servers. I think co-turn is the one that has had the largest fair share of vulnerabilities because it's the oldest as well. So, and it's written in C or C++. So, there's that. It's like any other software, right? You need to keep it up to date. Otherwise, it might get compromised. But yeah, these are the problems. Now, in terms of fixes, the blog post is quite extensive, but in terms of fixes, we give some best practices in this article, but then we have published an article specifically on that, and we say basically split it in three, take three approaches. So the first approach would be to isolate, and the second one, restrict and then update. What I mean by isolate is, use a dedicated network or security group for AWS terms away from your internal systems. So that, if someone abuses your turn server, regardless of the rules you put on it, it's kind of not so useful for the attacker. And that's what we found, in fact, when we did the bug bounty stuff. The Signal app, they had a vulnerable turn server, but we couldn't reach anywhere. So, we were like, okay, there's nothing to do here. And they didn't, they fixed it, but it was no big deal in their case. While in the case of Slack and a couple of others, it was a worse problem. So isolate is really, really useful. And then you should restrict, right? And restriction comes in different ways, but the most obvious way is to prevent relaying to internal and local IP ranges. And sometimes you can even restrict your relay destinations to known media servers only. So here we give some examples of IP ranges that you might want to block. Later on, we have a whole table, full of these IP ranges that you probably have no reason to relay to because they are not users. So IPv6, don't forget about that as well. And then, the third one, and you should also limit the protocols that you allow, in the sense that you can often disable TCP relaying, for example. So that prevents a lot of the abuse, even if you have the rules in your co-turn server to prevent, internal IP addresses from being a peer. You might still want to disable TCP relaying, for example, if your media servers are not using TCP at all, or if your users are not using TCP at all for their WebRTC traffic media. And there are more things, but rate limiting is, of course, really useful for various reasons. One thing that, most of these things don't really apply to companies or software where you're not hosting your own turn server. But there is one thing that does apply, and we mentioned here, which is your turn credential API. You're probably going to take care of that yourself in your web applications to dispense these temporary time-based credentials, and you'll want to make sure that they, if where possible, they apply authentication and authorization. Now, it's not as effective as in other areas in many cases, so keep that in mind, because if you have a public-facing conferencing system, where anyone can register or just join anonymously, then you can't really apply authentication in the traditional sense. You might still be able to, come up with solutions, but it would definitely not be enough. But that's something you have control over, as even if you're using something like Twilio's hosted turn service. All right, and then what else do you need to do? So we said restrict, block relay to internal local IPs, limit protocols, rate limiting, and of course patching, right? Keep up to date. And in fact, we just published this today, and where is it? And yesterday, CoTurn actually released a new version, which fixes a number of security issues. Incidentally, good for us, for our talk here, and for the blog posts as well. So I don't mention it here, but I think I mentioned it in the other Coturn specific article. One of them is the ability to bypass the access control rules by using IPv6, which we had reported in 2020, but someone found the bypass for that bypass that we had reported. So for the fixes that were applied. So yeah, there's that. Keep your software up to date. Yeah, and so we have 3 blog posts here that are interesting, I think, to the audience if you're running your own Tern server. But I think I should mention that the best Tern server to secure is the one you don't run. And we had this chat with Sean Dubois and even Sahi, where SFU architectures nowadays often don't necessarily need Tern at all if they support certain things, and that really solves a lot of the security issues that we're talking about here, and it would make my blog posts totally useless, but they're not, right? So
For sure.
we keep finding the same vulnerabilities over and over again in our work. So it's clearly it's not easy to secure Tern servers. Let's put it that way.
No, and even if you're using a commercial one, make sure you're still taking care of those credentials. But yeah, as kind of has been touched on a couple ways in our conversation with everyone today, the best Tern servers are if you can get away with not using one, but there are many cases where you will need to manage your own, either for technical reasons or for cost reasons. So lots of great advice that you've all shared today. I appreciate it. Also, thanks to Sahi, who's put in some replies on YouTube and LinkedIn to questions that people have asked there as well. So make sure you're checking out the comments on this video on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll also put links to Sandro's blog posts in there, by the way, as well, so that you can see more about that. Great time to ask any other questions that you, for those watching of us live, if you would like. But first, I want to see if I can pit Sandro and Sahi against each other a little bit here. So, Sandro, one of your recommendations there was to turn off the TCP relay if you can. So, Sahi, you talked about kind of the cascading possibilities we can do of UDP to TCP relay to TLS. What do you think about, would you turn that off?
Definitely.
I failed at pitting you against each other then.
No, the configuration there has nothing to do with how WebRTC works. It's the inner workings of Coturn itself for a feature that WebRTC does not use.
Yeah. So let me ask kind of the panel then, for all of you. You can all answer this if you like. If Tern disappeared tomorrow, how broken would the internet be? And how happy or sad would you be, maybe?
Well, I'll be sad because I have less consulting to do to clients.
Because these questions come up so much.
Yeah, all the time. It's like half the time the issues are Tern. I think so. The only ones that really suffer from that in the long term are the peer-to-peer services. Those that require media server will persevere, and simply because they will switch to using IceTCP, or God forbid, MOC, media over quit. The peer-to-peer ones will have no solution other than going through a server that will relay their data that isn't called Tern and would know what goes inside unless something is built on top, but then you need to trust the one that is doing that to do that implementation, whereas today you trust the browser vendors. which there are a lot less of them, and they're usually more trustful.
So speaking of trust, sorry, and then jump in, Sandro, but I got to bring up this comment from Miroslav. The most secure Turn server, the one that's offline, just like the most secure PC is the one never connected to the internet.
Well, it might be offline because of denial of service as well. So.
Fair enough. Maybe it's involuntarily offline. Good point. It's been enrolled in the bot army that you warned us about.
Yeah. From our end, I mean, we would be also sad because, like Sahi, we would have not the same exactly like Sahi, but we would have harder targets to to test. So the turn stuff is kind of, you find it in a lot of places, and there's always twists. You bypass this rule because you find something like the new vulnerability in CodeTurn, for example. But it's something we kind of know. While there's a lot more in WebRTC that is more embedded and harder to get to, but one has to, if there's no turn servers to turn to to attack, then you have to look at other things. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So again, kind of question for all of you, whoever wants to answer this. At what scale does turn become an operational concern, or at what scale, do you need to manage it versus a public one? What are this? Is there any point in that that's a turning point for you? There you go. I'll put in the pun too.
It's the first user in production.
Think about it before the first user. Yeah.
Yes, because where is it coming from? I mean, look at this call. Where are you at the moment, Arin?
I'm in Panama at the moment. So yeah, I think we've got at least 2 continents covered in this conversation, and
yes, and
3 or 4 countries.
It's like, is that the same continent as Europe? I'm not sure. That depends who does the counting. So, but we're definitely from 3 or 4 different countries in this call, which means that if we're all on turn servers, it's probably 4 different turn servers in 4 different locations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for one call. So it's like, how do you scale something if you don't know where your users are? You probably need to put turn everywhere. So that would be 5 or 6 regions to begin with to make it worthwhile. Or you'd say, well, I only cater for customers from Europe. Guess what? I'm traveling to the US next week. True story, flying out tomorrow. So that means that I'm a European customer that is going to start connecting from the US for my calls.
Right.
So you never know where these customers come from. I like the HelixML. They had a nice blog post explaining how their customers are all coming from enterprise networks. And then they say, oh, slap, we've got someone coming from a coffee shop instead. So you don't know where they're coming from, hence you can't really know where you need to return servers, hence you need them everywhere, which becomes a DevOps operation to begin with. Then you need scaling inside the region. That's the second, that would be the second tier. But I think that becomes a bit simpler once you get the grip of doing the multiple regions.
Yeah, exactly. So is there a future where turn is not necessary? No. Easy question.
Yes, and again, turn won't be necessary when WebRTC isn't necessary. We're not there yet. We might at some day be there, but there are no signs of such a day coming in the next, let's say, 5 years. After that, who knows?
Yeah. Okay, so earlier, I think while you and I were talking, Sahi, I made the joke of deploy around and find out to see how much traffic in your use case for your user base is going to actually be using turn. So that brings up the question too, like how do you load test a turn configuration in an application?
So, well, you do what everyone does, which is throw browsers at it if you can, and then fudge the network so they force a relay through the server, configure that in the application in advance to force them to go through the turn servers and relay the data. There are other ways. I mean, I think the co-turn comes with its own stress testing mechanism, but that would be something that is kind of synthetic to the extreme. So it's not the same as putting actual live users on that.
Yeah. All right. My last question for the group then. What's one thing you wish every WebRTC developer understood about Turn?
You didn't prepare us for this one.
I didn't. That's true.
I think the answer is that it's not as simple as it seems.
Yeah.
So, treat it with the word in English, the honor that it deserves.
Yeah. I know what you mean, at least. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's often, I think, like a side project rather than, getting the full attention that it should receive. If you're deploying a turn server, it has certain implications.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
The second thing that was suggested, trying not to self-host and self-manage it, go and use a third party. The reasons to use a third party is because it is going to be cheaper at the beginning. That's for sure. It's going to reduce their time to market, increase the security, the load, stability, scalability, connectivity, everything. And if you want to switch later on, there is no vendor lock-in besides the risks of losing while moving all the traffic.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, we lost Hector there a moment ago, so maybe his turn server got attacked. And well, these are modern. These are network realities for sure. But appreciate Hector's time. Sandro, Sahib, appreciate both of your time very much as well. Sandro and Sahib, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share?
I'll tell you mine next month when we speak.
All right. Sounds good. Looking forward to that. That will be on March 25th, our next episode then, where you can hear Sahi's thoughts. Sandro, anything else you want to share before we wrap?
Oh, yeah. I didn't mention the newsletter. So every month we release a newsletter called the RTC Sec newsletter. It's coming out soon, very soon, tomorrow or Friday. So yeah, subscribe to that. It's on enablesecurity.com/newsletter.
And it is really, really good.
It is good. I agree completely.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, highly recommended. So yeah, to learn more about Sandro's work and see his excellent content, visit enablesecurity.com and make sure that you sign up for that newsletter as well. To see blog posts that Hector's written and learn more about our work, check us out at WebRTC.ventures. And Sahi, as you know, if you're a regular viewer of this, check out bloggeek.me to learn more about Sahi's work as well and sign up for his courses and excellent newsletters also. So thank you again for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. And as I already mentioned, our next episode will be on March 25th. We won't be doing an industry analysis segment today with Sahi and I, since you've heard from Sahi and I enough for today, but you will hear from him next month as well. And our next episode will be Wednesday, March 25th with Balaz Kreith from Riverside FM. And we'll be releasing more details about that episode soon. So to find out more about that episode and to see all of our interviews with WebRTC industry experts, follow us on social media at WebRTC.Ventures on Twitch, LinkedIn, YouTube, and join our email list at WebRTC.Ventures. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Let's make it live.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.